Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So, Battle for Azeroth was pitched as a faction war expansion, but we've all known that it likely would not end that way, especially with all of the old god hints, and of course the rise of a Shara patch. Now, dazar'alor might be really the only faction-themed raid over all of the expansion, and with what we know about the fate of a few members of the Horde leadership through the patch 8.1.5 data mining, it is time to talk about the state of the Horde and where it could all go next. Of course, spoilers ahead. So, after the battle for dazar'alor, things do not look good for the Horde, but Sylvanas, of course, hatches a plan to use the risen Derek Proudmoore to assassinate his own family. This involves him being tortured in a move that echoes the actions of the Lich King, both narratively and visually. I mean, just look at how similar the two scenes are. This is beyond the pale, especially for Sylvanas, actually, because she had always said that her people, they serve her with their own free will, and that free will is the difference between the Forsaken and the Scourge. Sylvanas is already distasteful to most members of the Horde leadership, so when she starts doing things like this that do seem a little bit extreme even for her, well, you can be pretty sure things are going to go down. In patch 8.1.5, Baine and Zelling work together to free Derek Proudmoore and get him back to his family, thwarting Sylvanas' plans in the process, with another instance of there being choice for the player, where they actually get to report Baine's activities to Sylvanas or not. Now, if the Horde player reports Baine, then Sylvanas says that the player, has her protection and they are to follow along with his plan. Over on the Alliance side, though, Bellular appears to deliver a message to Jaina from Baine. It turns out that Baine wants to meet her in Theramore, with the idea being that, well, it'll be quite far out of the way for the rest of the Horde. Now, Sylvanas catches wind of this, and she calls her own meeting of the Horde leadership to happen before it. Now, this is something that happens deep in Stormsong in the enemy territory, and that really does confuse the people in attendance. They're not really sure what she's really doing, but yeah, she calls it in Stormsong, I believe, and this is really just a way to get ahead of Baine and Zelling. But anyway, others are in attendance, seemingly with very high-priced tickets, likely to have dirt on everyone there and to make a bit of a show of the whole thing. People think it's initially a show of force against the Alliance, but when asked what's going on by Zelling, Baine does, he says he's not really quite sure. Well, Sylvanas starts the meeting. She reveals there is a traitor in their midst, and that most of them have nothing to fear. She calls out Zelling, and based on the dialogue, I suspect she kills him in the upcoming cutscene. And when she is done, Baine seems to be shaken. Baine calls her out, saying that she is betraying the Horde, but she simply calls her guards to take him away, with his last words before being imprisoned being, "Others will see you for what you are, Sylvanas. You will leave the Horde in ruins." Sylvanas then tells everyone else that there can be no weakness in their ranks and that they are to remember their loyalties. Baine is in prison. Zelling seems to be dead. All in a big display of force to the other members of the Horde and in front of a sycophantic, bribed audience that's probably going to repeat it to the rest of the population, meaning that many of the regular Horde people will probably think that Baine betrayed them. Now, this meeting is seen by an Alliance spy who recalls it to Jaina. Of course, Jaina regards Baine favorably, and she wishes that others in the Horde would realize that Sylvanas has to be ended, regardless of her tragic backstory. Derek does eventually make his way back to Jaina, and Derek explains that Baine explained to him what really happened in Theramore over a decade ago. Derek understands what Jaina did, and he is at least glad to see that his remaining family is safe. Both him and Jaina, though, they understand that he just can't really come home yet, but Jaina does say there is someone who she wants him to meet who has went through a similar experience. Who? Well, it's almost certainly Calia Menethil, with of course her fate being something that Jaina learned about from Anduin after dazar'alor. So, there we go. Baine is in prison, but the anti-Sylvanas coalition grows. These events show us that Valeera is quite clearly on team anti-Sylvanas. In the past cinematic, we saw Valtois and Rexxar show their doubts about the Horde leadership after she leaves them high and dry deep in enemy territory. We've got Saurfang, who is of course at large. Maybe just, there's a growing group of rebels there. So because of that, what is the fate of the Horde? Well, prison breaks are all the rage in Battle for Azeroth. We've got Talanji, Tol Dagor, Saurfang, and then Tol Dagor again. So with Saurfang being at large and Baine being at prison, it seems to me like we're in for another prison break. It could be that Saurfang and Baine together would be able to essentially set up an exile Horde government, almost mirroring the founding of the Horde with, Thrall and Cairn back in War 3. As for Zakan, well, tricky for him because Sylvanas pretty much knows that he sided with Saurfang. Now, if the player betrayed him, then Sylvanas says to the player that she has special plans for him. So if this Baine meeting is anything to go by, then we can assume that Sylvanas knows that Zakan is over, is in the whole thing. So that's a bit tricky for him, but overall, I predict there's this group of characters, and there could be an alliance-supported exile Horde government that could be formed, and that could be the basis of a future resistance, especially if the likes of the Nightborn, Rexxar, Valyria, and also regular citizens decide to defect. That might not happen though, and I think what we really need to do is examine the state of the current Horde leadership, and we'll start off with the Orcs. It's kind of hard to know who leads them currently. Drekthar does not seem to be that involved with current events, and nobody really knows where Thrall is. Now, Eitrigg could be a likely candidate along with Geira, who of course leads the Mag'har. Now, Eitrigg, he's a loyal, honorable character. He goes way back. He served with Saurfang in the First and Second Wars, and even with that, he does still seem to be a loyal Horde commander. And we've not really heard his thoughts on Saurfang that much. As for Geira, I don't really know how to pronounce her name, to be honest, but as for her, well, looking at her from the, she seems to be the AU Thrall parallel, I suppose. Now, with her being a Frostwolf, I can't see her loving the death magic of Sylvanas. I think either of these characters could actually split off. Maybe the two of them, maybe Geira could work with our timeline's Drekthar, and that could create a pretty interesting sort of mirror and new coalition. Now, moving on to the Trolls, well, Rokan, he's a very traditional, honorable character. He worked with vol'jin. I can't really imagine him loving Sylvanas that much, but he does fight in dazar'alor, and really that's his love of his fellow trolls, probably more so than his favorability of the direction of the Horde. Now, he gets tied up in the distraction in Nazmir, so even though he likely doesn't like Sylvanas, he probably feels partially responsible for the death of Rastakhan, and that could engage him further in the war. Now, he is also good friends with Rexxar. Rexxar, as I covered, has expressed some modern doubts in the Horde, so maybe the two of them could split off together, even though Rexxar at one point did say that Jaina had to be ended because writing. Now, further to that, we got the Tauren. Of course, they're going to be livid with Baine's capture. Unless Sylvanas has an Alistair Campbell tier spin doctor, I really don't know how she's going to pull that one off with the Tauren. So the Tauren could be the basis of this new body of resistance against the Horde. I doubt she's going to be able to install, say, Magatha Grim Totem as the leader or anything like that. Then we've got the High Mountain. Again, they were culturally quite close to the Tauren, to Baine's Tauren, so they're not going to be happy about this. Now, really, the guy who got them into the Horde has just been put in prison, so I'd say the High Mountain are probably not friends of Sylvanas. Then we've got the Goblins. They just want money, so they're going to be firmly under her control, and that leaves us then with the Nightborn. Well, Valtoire's not really happy about it. We have no idea what the rest of them think, but they just culturally seem like a terrible fit for the current Horde, and as much as Tyrande sort of turned her nose up at them, well, the Nightborn must know they're being dragged down a pretty dark path. I can't see them hanging around that much longer narratively. Now, we know they're going to have a large part to play in 8.2 because of the Forbes interview that happened recently. Of course, that's because Ashara is involved, so it does make a big narrative sense there. And then for the Blood Elves, well, after this stuff goes down, Lor'themar seems very suspect. Does not seem happy about Sylvanas, so she could actually risk alienating them as well. And you have to remember that Lor'themar almost fully signed up and switched sides to the Alliance. This is a long time ago in patch 5.1 of Mists of Pandaria, but yeah, they already almost flipped to the Alliance. And of course, they sort of redoubled towards the Horde a little bit. They got the Nightborn in as well, but if Sylvanas is pushing away the Nightborn, and she's also pushing away the regular Blood Elves, that really does not bode well for the cohesion of the Horde. And then we have to bear in mind that after this stuff goes down, Sylvanas then goes on to use the Black Blade of the Empire as a weapon against the Alliance. That's yet more madness, which will not endear her to the rest of the Horde, especially not to the High Mountain. Just look at how much Old God-related stuff happened in the High Mountain allied race recruitment scenario. It really seems like Sylvanas can only count on her undead to be loyal to her based on their principles, and really the goblins with some fear and bribery. And that is not a long-term viable solution for her. Now, there's a great real-world parallel here, actually. Most companies with dictatorships have fairly ineffective military forces, with an overly top-down structure with very centralized power and not that much devolved command. Now, a lot of these dictatorships do that because they think it reduces the chance of a coup happening. Well, the coups happen, and they all have remarkably ineffective fighting forces, regardless of how much, high-tech military equipment they're given. And really, there seems to be a parallel there with Sylvanas if she keeps on going down this dark path trying to centralize power. So what's going to happen here? Well, I can't be sure. It all depends really in the final patch of this expansion. Basically, will there be further content surrounding a change in Horde leadership? Will there be a raid, basically? I kind of doubt it. I doubt we're going to have a Siege of Orgrimmar 2. And we've just done dazar'alor. I think it'll go one of two ways. I think either Sylvanas will abdicate, she'll take her loyalists and maybe the Black Blade and do her own thing. This would probably involve a transfer of power back to the likes of Thrall or Saurfang, and that would not require a massive raid story. Alternatively, we could see a second Horde government be formed. Blizzard, for a time, could maybe have players, at least for narrative and PvE purposes, have the Horde essentially be split between those who side with Sylvanas' government and Saurfang/Thrall's government, with there being some sort of conclusion that takes us back to having one stable Horde. It all comes down basically to how Blizzard want to manage this storyline from a content perspective. One thing is really clear to me though, Sylvanas does not have that much time left as Warchief. As much as it would be fun to think about a third faction or something like that, I really doubt that it will happen. I suspect that the goal is to have Sylvanas leave and then become an important character in the upcoming death arc of the storyline that I believe that they have been teasing. Essentially, I think they want to boot Sylvanas out of the Horde, restabilize what the Horde means, and then have Sylvanas be a major player in the upcoming story. At least that's what I suspect about the future of the Horde. Let me know what you would like to see down below. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.